Hey everybody, welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
Today we're going to be talking with Honeywell's Karen Baumer about retail trends, including personalization of retail, some tech solutions that are taking off, and we'll make a few predictions about the future of retail. As always, we'll have our recurring segments, the value to the VAR, and what's tech connecting with us. It's time to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
Our guest today on the show is Karen Baumer from Honeywell. She's the Director of Vertical Marketing. Karen, welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely. Karen, tell us a little bit about yourself. The title Director of Vertical Marketing might be ambiguous maybe to some of our listeners, so explain a little bit about what you do and how you got there.
Oh, well, sure. So at Honeywell, we define vertical marketing as the function of really delivering value to the different verticals that we all experience. So today we're talking about retail, and retail is one of the verticals I focus on. But as a company, Honeywell's focused on healthcare, transportation and logistics, and then the DC warehouse space. And I lead this team in delivering value to the end users and working with BlueStar to help deliver that value. I joined Honeywell after many years in the technology space, but not necessarily the AIDC space, and have a pretty rich background in technology and delivering technology to retailers. The benefit is I am an avid shopper, whether it's in the store or online, so I have that personal interest as well.
There you go. So you're not only you're a practitioner as well as somebody who professes in the space as well.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah, it's always nice to be passionate about the industry in which you work. So.
So have you been dying lately since you can't go out and shop, or because we're currently living under the pandemic, we're still in the COVID-19 era as we record this. So many of us have not been to a shopping center in 10 weeks, something like that.
A few months,
so I don't know, Karen, is that you find yourself depressed because of that?
Yeah, and about week 2, I started having some withdrawals. So not only do I like to shop, I'm a bit of a bargain shopper. And as we know, in our current situation, there are tons of sales. And then you layer on the fact that in April, I had a birthday, and every retailer I'd ever shopped with online sent me additional coupons. So my withdrawals turned into a game, and just how much money I could save. And, I always kind of defaulted to buying some clothing, but we've also bought some stuff for the house and for the yard, and actually a few gourmet food items because we're trying to stay out of the grocery store. So we're being a little bit, open-minded there. But yeah, I had withdrawals in about week 2. I'm kind of over that. I've contributed to online sales, but always a deal.
That sounds like my house. I mean, we were talking about that the other day. You hit on everything, literally, yep. Karen. I mean, so my middle daughter, who's a senior in high school this year, she's been jonesing. And like every other day, her comment is, I just wish I could go out and shop. Okay, and she's not, she's not a high-end shopper. She actually loves to go to the thrift store. Right. That's her store. She'll go to the thrift store. She will literally spend $2-3 on a hoodie and have the best experience. But like you, we're buying stuff online. Yes, we're doing the stuff at home, the eating at home. We've talked about how just increased eating at home. We're still trying to support our local restaurants. So tonight, as a matter of fact, Wednesday takeout we do. And stuff like that. But man, we cooked before, but we're doing even more of that. And we're doing like cooking challenges with the kids now at home. They get to make the appetizer. We're making the main meal, that kind of stuff that's going on there. But anyway.
Definitely. Well,
I'm
Karen,
glad to know I'm not alone.
There you go.
yeah,
You're not
definitely.
alone.
Not alone at all. Well, Karen, that's actually kind of a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about
Yep.
because obviously, as someone who is potentially a bit of an avid shopper and has had to change your experience, and you mentioned that personalization that you have been getting. You get those emails with discounts and deals for your birthday. I always get notifications when my anniversary's coming up. Hey, it's time to get some flowers for Jennifer, which I'm actually the kind of person I like to surprise her with flowers at random times.
Good
Not
boy.
just when she expects them, because it's more fun that way. So, Karen, I want to ask you, tell us a little bit about what's happening around personalization at retail. What's been happening, and what should we expect to be the future?
Yeah, so that's a great question because I think personalization was already kind of on the rise. Years ago, we talked about clienteling. It's really come down to personalization. And online shopping kind of accelerated it. And I think now it's going to be accelerated faster. I think the thing I've observed the most is, yes, my birthday was in April. I got all these coupons, but there was clearly a delineation between those retailers that just documented that date and had me as part of their program or loyalty program or subscription versus the retailers that actually had my purchase history and started to suggest similar things, or especially in clothing, garments that went with things I had purchased previously. And I'm really seeing that is kind of where things might be going. I mentioned clothing, but all three of us have just talked about grocery. If grocery continues, I think that a standard shopping list is one thing, but actually making recommendations based on your purchase history is something else. And I think kind of the utopia that every retailer wants, as there's typically a blend of in-store brick and mortar and online, is the ability to be predictive versus just seeing what you've done, after purchase. And there's one retailer I shop at who I'm a huge loyalty person, but my coupons are always issued after I purchase based on what I had just purchased versus being predictive about my coming in. So I think there's going to be the shift that leverages purchase history. I think some retailers are going to have to work really fast, really quickly to do it. And then there's also going to be the need to be predictive versus reactive.
Yeah, and one point that you had in there, Karen, that I think is important to note, and I was reading up on some articles around behavior and shopping behavior and the need for a blended. I can remember back when online shopping started to really get a little bit of a run. It was the death of retail, the death of brick and mortar. It's going away. Well, in a recent survey, a State of Consumer Behavior report found that close to 60% of age over 35 still prefer to shop at physical locations. No surprise there. But 45% of consumers 18 to 34 also prefer to be in a brick and mortar. So I think it's important to realize, and to me, that just further solidifies the fact that, yes, it's going to have to be a blend of technology, but you can't forget about the brick and mortar. The other thing that was important, Karen, that I thought you were touching on there was, and I had a thought, a lot of these companies, how do they enable the store associate at the time? Karen walks in, oh, hi, Karen. How do we enable those store associates to say, oh, we know it's Karen. Karen bought this the last time. Maybe recommend this, as a thing. I think we'll get there, right, Karen? That's where this inner web of things is going to get us to, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Those are great points.
Yeah.
So, Karen, I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit then maybe about some of the technology that is helping enable this personalization. Obviously, right now in our current situation, a lot of retailers are closed, or if they're able to remain open, they're doing a lot of curbside pickup. They're doing a lot more delivery than they were doing before. And then, even once we're past this, we're getting to the point where we're slowly starting to see some places maybe allow retail to open back up, but it's going to be limited capacity. They're still going to encourage, or, the preference will probably be for buy online, pick up in store, for curbside pickups whenever possible. So tell us a little bit about some of the technology that's happening out there. Where are you seeing the impact, and where can where can retailers go with this in the future, post-pandemic even, to make a difference?
Well, I think Dean just touched on it, associate empowerment. And the fastest way to get there is via mobility. So we all use our personal phones to enable us to do things in our personal life, whether it's a phone call, email address, search, order, restaurant, shop, whatever. And so we're empowering ourselves in our personal lives. Associates need that as well. So whether it's buy online, pick up in store, curbside, in-store communications, point of sale, I think that there's going to be a quick way to transition to mobility for that. And that's something that the associate would hold. So an enterprise type of mobile device. I think what has happened recently is, that's fine for the associate to have it, and that's the empowerment they need to serve the customer. But there's still the element of loyalty for the consumer. And so they're scanning, right? And we have this huge emphasis on contactless scanning. And so, before 2 months ago, you would have, I hand my keychain over because that's where all my loyalty cards are. Some people have it on their mobile device. In pharmacies, you're sharing insurance cards and your ID, or in grocery, age-restricted items with ID. And you always were handing that to an employee, an associate. I think there's going to be a significant shift where the consumer, the shopper, presents something, and it's going to be contactless presentation. And as Dean said, empowerment and being, we both said predictive. Could there be some type of contactless scanning upon entering a store that allows all this information to occur? Certainly more complex from an infrastructure standpoint than empowering every associate with a mobile device. But via mobility, you can load a multitude of apps on it that tie into the retailer's back end in order to drive productivity and profitability.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, I think that's, at least that's, and you were touching on it there, Karen, a little bit. We've all seen the movie, or at least most of us have, Minority Report, where walk in the digital display, which was really high end, might have even been a holographic display, recognize the person, hey, your last purchase. Okay, but to get there, we know now, is it possible? Sure. What does it take? A heavy investment on the infrastructure to do that. Beaconing, our IoT, et cetera, et cetera. But a little bit more of a guerrilla approach would be a ruggedized mobile device that you can enable the associate with and tie it into back-end ERP systems, a little bit about what their buying behavior of the person once they do engage with them. These are the technologies that I think are a lot easier to implement, in today's world, if you will. So yeah, I would totally agree. Above and beyond that, Karen, what do you think about some of these things like lockers, smart lockers, and things like that, where again, a touchless environment? And I'll just harken to my own personal experience. I had no idea that Walmart has put in these ginormous kiosks in the middle of the store. Have you seen these yet?
No.
Where you buy online and then you get a locker. It's put into a locker, and then you walk up to this giant kiosk, right. and you've got a QR code. You scan it from your phone, and then it tells you what locker you are, and the door pops open, and then you get your stuff. You don't contact anybody, and it's basically right inside the door. This seems like a trend, Karen, right? Like smart lockers, that kind of technology, yeah?
Yeah, so I think lockers are an interesting concept. I think some retailers have tested them for a number of years. And I think in some retail applications, they are ideal, and the trend's going to continue. In other retail situations, I think there's further development, especially with things like refrigeration or serving people who don't have a phone for a QR code. But I think it's something that's going to have a nice runway for the next few years. I have seen those type of things. I don't know how many people are using them, but it's exciting to see them out there.
I'm with you. Yeah, it's not. I seem to be the only one. Maybe some other another person used them as well, but I think it just gets to the whole commentary on our behavior. We're in a really awkward spot as a society right now, and that a lot of these technologies, I feel, this is just my personal opinion, that we're kind of starting to grow a little bit, are really being fast tracked right now.
Oh, yeah.
Because of wanting to be touchless, wanting to be curbside. I was in line and I looked across the way, and there's the IHOP restaurant, and they've got the whole curbside thing going. They have people outside. They've got cones, orange cones. I couldn't tell what kind of devices they were using to do the payment and stuff like that. But curbside is another, as you already mentioned, right, Karen, is another area where we're going to see, I believe, radical change. A lot of adaptation going on there.
Yeah.
Right now.
Karen, something I wanted to ask you a little bit more about is in BOPIS in particular, which, I was looking at some statistics. One that mentioned that BOPIS was up about 30% last year. And obviously this year that's spiking dramatically. In just the first month of the COVID outbreak, BOPIS was up 87%. And I imagine that's probably growing even then some from here on out. But you kind of briefly mentioned when we were discussing before the podcast that you feel like there may be some challenges with some consumers around it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So BOPIS is one of those things that I think is here to stay. It was previously thought of as a convenience, and now I think it's emerging as a necessity. And there are a lot of benefits of it, but I think like any new technology could be considered a nascent technology, there's growth that has to happen. So I think that we typically talk about the challenges of implementing it in the store. Again, empowering the associate with the right technology to pick the order. Do you pick it from the back room? Do you pick it from the shelves? If you pick it from the shelves, how do you make sure people who come into the store have inventory? How do you tie that into the back end? And that's a whole discussion and probably worth another podcast. I think that the user interface is where the whole industry has just kind of like been hit between the eyes. I know I've started to try it. I think that on a personal level, where I see the most challenges is with my parents and their peers, or my friends' parents who are truly baby boomers, who are in high risk categories, who are trying to stay out of the store, but perhaps rarely use a computer and really are having to learn this real time. And we should give them all kudos for trying to do things differently. But I'll tell you two situations that have happened with my parents. One is they got home, they had spent $7 on something, and when they unpacked their bag from home, they discovered that $7 item had expired 3 days before they had picked it up. So that's some supply chain issues. It should have never been picked. They chose not to get out of the car to check their order because they didn't want to, defy social distancing. But they're like, we're stuck with it. We're not going to go back to the store because we have to go in to get a refund. We're just going to call this a learning lesson. And that's what they did. But it's unfortunate because if they had been in the store, they never would have put that in their cart. And that was their first online order ever, first BOPIS ever. So it was not perfect. So they did an order again. And I was just talking to my parents on Sunday for Mother's Day. And my mother said, we're still going through these 21 tomatoes. I'm like, 21 tomatoes? What happened? Well, your father needed 6 tomatoes, 1 per day, but he ordered 6 pounds because the user interface didn't say you're buying pounds versus eaches.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Now, I might have caught that, but they're like, we got 21 tomatoes for the two of us. And it's comical. Like, I'm busting up and cracking up because I went in very fine print. It says 1 equals 1 to 1.4 pounds, but he put 6. And like, these are just things that every retailer has a different interface. Now, he paid for it. They're going to eat most of them. They've done a lot of cooking, but like, these are the things with BOPIS that I don't think we really thought through as a society, or even the people making the apps. But it's the user that is the one who is kind of like having to manage through this. And my whole point is it's not just what happens in the store, it's that whole shopper experience and having your brand represented. And so this one retailer has made $7 off of them and sold them 6 pounds of tomatoes for a couple in their late 70s to eat in 1 week. So it's just, these are challenges.
They are.
Definitely. And I can totally relate to that, even for myself. And I'm, not exactly a boomer, maybe close to it, but not quite. But I love grocery pickup, and I like to order my groceries online. I like to be able to go pick them up. So they just load them in my trunk and go on. But I have found, and I have to pay very close attention sometimes when I'm ordering, where something might say it's X amount of ounces. And I hate to say it, but I don't always know what that means, So I say okay, this looks fine. So let's say I'm trying to order maybe a little canister of butter or something that's, just a small amount to last me for a little while. And instead I come home with the giant industrial size package of butter because I didn't pay attention to the ounce size and what that actually meant. So you're right. There's definitely some disconnect there between the interface and what they expect us to understand versus what you might actually get. They're just literally doing their job and saying, all right, this person ordered 50 ounces of butter, because they didn't know any better. And when I get it, I go, man, that's not actually what I was trying to do at all.
Isn't that fascinating, though, Karen? That's just an interesting commentary that these stores have spent so much time and money, and they understand brick and mortar and the customer experience really well.
Right.
And I think that a lot of them have been doing a lot of things over these last few years. I've noticed is just as a consumer, whether it's just the style of the store, how they lay it out. They really are, we're starting to focus in on customer experience as it relates, again, to the in-store experience. That's not translating really well to BOPIS and that experience, because it is still a customer experience, right? The whole thing, logging on, selecting your goods, driving to the store.
Yep.
Oh, I got to wait 45 minutes where I didn't used to have to do that. So now I'm a little disgruntled when I pull up to the line, and you're meeting an equally disgruntled person who doesn't really feel like putting the stuff in your car. So that whole customer experience needs to be reevaluated. I'll throw one more on the table. My wife does the shopping. We try to keep it to just one person that goes to the grocery store. And her comment the last time is they have all the BOPIS collectors, I guess the people that are fulfilling the orders. This is in a grocery store, jamming up the aisles. You can't. Yep. She couldn't get what we need because there were so many of those people facilitating the orders. And she's like, they should have a DC center by now that does all that.
Right.
And if you're going to risk going into the store, you don't want to run into the associates. So just a lot of work that needs to be done there.
Yeah, there is a lot to figure out. And I think BOPIS is here to stay, but exactly what your wife shared with you, where do you fill the order? Could you have done that in the back room? And think about all the training that's having to occur at the retailer, because the technology to pick and the skills to pick are very different than replenishment. You're putting things on the shelf, and you can have, you shouldn't have errors, but errors are more forgiving putting it on the shelf. When you're picking for someone else, it has to be exact. And again, your wife has chosen to go in. So what about her experience? There's just a lot to figure out. But I think it's like any new application or any new technology, it will be figured out. And I think it's going to be accelerated because of what we're going through right now.
I just had an idea. If I was a reseller, a VAR that was in the transportation logistics or DC world, I might go start knocking on some of these retail establishments, because I've got a lot of tribal knowledge about what it takes to pick, pack, and that experience. That, to your point, Karen, these retailers, those associates, that's not what they were hired originally to do, but they've got this whole new world that they have to now deal with. And a lot of small to medium-sized businesses, I think, are trying to grapple with that too. If you're a store owner, you probably have a passion about whatever boutique. You don't have a passion about pick, pack, and shipping. Right? But it's equally important to know that skill set, because, again, it comes back to the customer experience. Really fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Karen, one last question I want to ask you about is the future of retail. Let's make a few predictions here.
There you go, yeah.
So, and I kind of want to start off with instant checkout, which I feel like is one of those topics that's been floating around in retail for a long time, especially as it relates maybe to RFID. Let's be honest, everything RFID has been floating around in the channel for a long time and never quite seemed to get to where everyone predicts it's going to be. But in particular, where it comes to instant checkout, what are you seeing? What do you think is actually going to happen there?
Oh, so what is going to happen? I don't know if I'm qualified to predict that, but I do think it's going to, again, accelerate because the instant checkout is truly contactless. Like it's even more advanced than self-checkout, right? And I think if we're talking about RFID, that's going to be more suited towards the apparel and the soft good market, which is going to be interesting when that opens back up. You know, a lot of touch there, trying on, checking out, removing security tags. I mean, there's just a lot that's happening there. And I think that is the market that's ideally suited for any type of RFID checkout. I think maybe the picture that was painted many years ago about a shopping cart, or as I would say, a buggy full of goods going through an RFID portal is a great aspiration, but I don't know how tangible that is in short term, especially with metal shopping carts. But I think there's definitely something there in the soft goods space. And is it going to be instant and self-served, or are you going to have an associate with some type of mobile infrastructure just to kind of speed it along? I think that will kind of shake itself out pretty quickly.
Yeah. And that's a possibility with the mobility, again, that I think is a little bit of an easier putt than, say, a holistic RFID buggy, if you will, and trying to scan all that along the way. Another fascinating thing that I've been kind of thinking about, Karen, I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, would be robotics in the space of retail. You know, I guess I'm a guy. I love seeing robotic things, and I'm just fascinated by Boston Robotics and how they can make looking things flip, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's here. Robotics, I feel like, is really here. Not just Osmo, you know, that Honda creature that kind of looked human, but was ridiculously expensive and it only had battery life of like 2 minutes. But I really feel like it's there. So I don't know if retail is going to get it. Is it going to be on the replenishment side of restocking? Is it going to be on the help side? Karen, what do you think about robotics in the space of retail?
So I think, you know, the use of robots in retail is the opposite of what we just talked about RFID. So RFID is well suited for soft goods. Robotics is better suited for hard goods. Yes, there is an expense there. I think that the market is anticipating that robotics would be used for the replenishment side versus the checkout side. But I really have to stop and think, like, are humans ready to see robots in the aisles? And Dean, you said you're a guy and you're enamored by it. And my mind goes to, oh, some child is going to say, that's cool, let me go ride it. And like, how many children can be on a robot covering all the cameras trying to do inventory? So then that begs the question.
That viral video of the baby holding onto the iRobot or the Roomba and going across the floor. No, it's an excellent point, Karen. Excellent point. Yeah. Okay.
But that's where my mind goes immediately. And then, so now you have this high cost, and then how easy is it to implement? And then do you only do robots after hours? I think there's a lot to be done, but I definitely think it would be better suited for the inventory replenishment side versus the picking or the purchasing side. I know that there's decades worth of investment and research done in this space, but I think in the very short term, well, we are talking about future here, but in the very short term, I'm not sure retail's ready for robotics, but in the future, perhaps.
It's just one of those things I wonder. Yeah, go ahead, Karen. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't think children are going to change, and I don't know, like, is that,
No, not so much.
Excellent.
is that, and there might be grown adults that try it too, but it's that transition of only seeing humans in the store to seeing humans and robots. When are we better suited for that?
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of evaluations of some variation. Do you put it on the shopping cart or on the basket? Like, where is it? Where does it go?
I mean, because I always wonder if I put my reseller hat back on, if I'm a VAR, that's one of those tantalizing areas. Do I start researching that? Do I get my programmers to understand how to program robotics? And because you see how sometimes they can be really easy to do, other times, I don't know. It's just one of those worlds that I guess I agree. Maybe not there right now, but sometime in the future, don't know when, it's definitely going to be a part. And I think obviously that's behavioral and societal along the way as well. What is our society when are we going to be accepting of that? But again, the fascinating part about this pandemic is how it has utterly fast-tracked some of these technologies. You hear hospitals talk about it. We had things on the chalkboard that we were talking about doing next year and the next 5 years that have all of a sudden they're happening right now.
Yep.
Got to implement them right now, type of a thing. So
Exactly.
crazy.
Yeah. Well, Karen, we definitely appreciate this conversation. I think we've had a good talk about retail trends. If any of our listeners out there are interested in sharing their thoughts or have any additional questions, you can find us on Twitter at TEConnectPod or email us techconnect@bluestarinc.com. We're going to shift over to our two recurring segments here at the end of our show. The first is Value to the VARs. This is where we're going to talk a little bit about everything we've discussed today and how it matters to our VARs that are actually out there with their customers. So the question I had, and Karen, I'll let you start, is how should VARs be thinking outside of the box with retail right now? What should they be doing differently?
Don't go it alone. Like, I think some of the best advancements we've had have been in partnership. And I think that what's going to happen in retail is no different. I talked about many different things today. A selfish plug is, Honeywell is always working with VARs and with BlueStar. And I think there's tons of opportunities, but you might have your niche, but don't go it alone because adoption is key.
Absolutely. And if I could kind of parlay on that, because, I totally agree on the ecosystem, as we talked about before. One of the values of the VAR, look, when we're in situations like this where there's a lot of change, just keep thinking to yourself equals opportunity. I know that that's hard sometimes when you're just trying to get the bills paid or you're worried, especially now. If you're a small to medium-sized business, it's all about just making sure you have enough revenue coming in. But you can also have an ear to the ground for opportunity. Situations like this spark opportunity, and you're going to become dependent on your ecosystem that you build. So partnering, I think that's great advice, Karen. Having more partners or at least more availability. Maybe the relationship you have with that RFID software company doesn't really pan out, but the one over here that, I don't know, is getting into robotics, who knows, or something like that, maybe it does. So I would advocate your ecosystem, continue to build that out, and continue to look for opportunities during these really unique times.
Yeah, I'd agree. The other thing I think that occurs to me too is not being afraid to have some tough conversations with some of your customers. I imagine there's a lot of retailers out there that did have to just completely close up shop.
Oh, sure.
For one reason or another, could not operate, could not pivot to curbside or BOPIS in any kind of way. So it might be a matter of just talking to some of them and saying, hey, this happened. I know it happened. It was awful. I'm sorry this happened to you. Let's talk about it not happening again. And obviously, we all hope and pray that there's not going to be another pandemic in our lifetimes, but again, that's the unpredictability of the future is let's be ready for some things just in case they do, or, just the shifting tides of retail in general. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe, for our VARs to go out there and ask some of the tough questions, have these conversations and talk about this is the future. We know it's coming. How can we help you get there before you have to get there or before you're forced out of business because you can't?
Well, I think that's really good advice, and that you're becoming the consultant, the valued consultant, if you will. The sometimes people need that reassuring voice from a partner out there, and a gentle nudge, or keep at it kind of a thing. Yep, I agree.
Agreed.
Yep, interesting.
Well, then for our final question, this is our fun segment. We call it What's Tech Connecting with You? This is where we get to talk about some of the fun technologies, cool things that are happening out there, maybe something we've been playing with, reading about, watching, just anything that's fun in the technology sphere. Karen, I'll let you start. What's Tech Connecting with you?
So the thing that's tech connecting with me at the moment is voice enablement of just about everything. We all have Siri or Alexa, and we're doing these voice commands. And again, it's not flawless, but it's come a long way. And I know that in my personal life, we're evaluating like a smart home and using voice for light control, thermostat control, the garage door. Haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, but I think like using your voice just as you speak versus commands, which is what I think there's been some trouble with adoption by always using like a certain set of commands versus maybe how you naturally speak. I'm kind of interested in where that's going to go. Like just the last 30 minutes or so, we're just talking and it's learning versus engaging your hands and taking your eyes off of something, like just the whole voice enablement.
I agree. That fascinates me as well. I'm there. I want that to be a part of my life, because I now find myself consciously recognizing, hey, if I could just speak that to something and it recognized it and did it, I don't know. I don't feel like we're there quite yet. Although I guess I could do it. Hey Siri, set an appointment for April 15th to whatever. I guess I'm not doing that yet, even though I know I could. But I'm with you. Maybe I'm the one who's waiting for it to just read my brain waves. Oh, I thought that I need to put milk on the grocery list.
Right.
Boop, it shows up.
Right.
I don't even have to say it. I just need to think it. That's a pretty good one. I like that one, Karen. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit more old school. Board games. Okay, so during this pandemic, what has the Reverman household been playing? Monopoly. Nice. We bought a Monopoly, and we had to take a couple of days to get there. But it's a family of 5, so I've got an 8-year-old, a senior in high school, and a sophomore in college. Me and my wife, we all play Monopoly. And of course, the first couple games, who won? Dad. I understood, the fine workings, if you will, of Monopoly. But now I'm getting totally outclassed. Yep. And who? By the 8-year-old. She is like a real estate tycoon here. But what I like about it is the family interaction. Okay, I come from a generation where board games were a thing, right, growing up, but I've been fascinated by the fact that some of these old things like gaming, and I know it goes back thousands of years. I don't know the history, but just the family interaction, the tactileness of playing with something, grabbing it and stuff like that. The ebb and flow of a game, even Monopoly has, its crescendos and its ebbs and its flows. Just it's been kind of cool doing that. We did go electric, by the way. We recently got into Kahoot. Have you done Kahoot?
I have not.
Karen, have you done Kahoot at all? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so it's online quizzing, and if you have your kids aren't of school age yet, John, but apparently Kahoot is everything in school right now. So all the quizzing is done. So everybody pulls out their phone. Right. It's basically a quiz, but you're graded on whether or not you got the answer right and how fast you got it done.
That sounds right up my alley.
So we did this awesome thing where my daughter did the first one. It's 20 questions about Ellie. And I'm telling you, our family has not laughed as hard as we laughed when we're all on Kahoot trying to answer the questions about Ellie as fast as possible. So anyway, games. That's what's tech connecting with me.
That's awesome.
I love it.
Yeah.
Games are great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Definitely. Well, for me, I read an interesting article this morning about autonomous vehicles. Actually, it was a transcript of a podcast from the Harvard Business School. It's a podcast called Cold Call. Oh. I actually got referred to it from a newsletter, a daily newsletter I get that just wraps up like interesting topics of the day that you might have missed. Mm-hmm. And first of all, that newsletter pointed out that autonomous vehicles kind of missed a mark right now. If there had been a bigger progression from where we are right now. I mean, that's the ultimate contactless delivery right now.
It is. That's really, it's
a
intuitive.
driverless vehicle just rolling up to your house and giving you your pizza and, and moving on. And I know they're testing that kind of stuff.
Right.
And obviously there's a lot of hurdles left to overcome, from regulatory and technological and political. And, there's a lot of hurdles to get there. So this podcast was kind of having a discussion about this with two Harvard professors that teach case studies around autonomous vehicles. And there was a few interesting points that they talked about. One was they basically set levels. So these levels of where you need to get to. And right now, like a car like mine is at like level 2, where there's a little bit of, it can maybe yank the wheel a little bit if I'm deviating from a lane.
Okay. Yeah,
It's got sensors to tell me when I'm getting too close. There's some vehicles that are a little bit further.
Assisted driving, not autonomous,
Exactly.
but assisted. Okay. Yeah.
So that's right now, that's considered level 2. And to some extent, like Teslas are like level 3. But
Okay.
They say for us to make this an ongoing thing, we have to get to level 5, which would be high end, completely autonomous, where every vehicle could potentially be autonomous. And that's just not going to happen for a while. So they basically kind of indicated that we're looking at maybe about another 20 to 25 years before we're even halfway to the goal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I don't know that we're going to see it in our
there
lifetime.
goes my Jetson.
I know.
I wanted the flying car.
Like maybe our grandchildren will be using it on a daily basis, but I think we're a little ways off for it ourselves. The other interesting point they made is, how this affects the emotion around cars, which is, a lot of us just like to drive. And we also, a lot of us treat, our vehicles as status symbols in some way. If you're driving a BMW or a Porsche or something, that's supposed to say something about you. But if they're all autonomous vehicles, and which means we may not even need to own one because one can just come up to our house and pick us up. Yeah. Does that status get thrown out the window? Are people going to be resistant to that because of it?
People figure out another way
They
to
will,
do
I think
status,
so.
right? That'll
Yeah.
always be around.
So it was an interesting article. I go out and Google it. It was the podcast is called Cold Call. It's from the Harvard Business School. It's about autonomous vehicles. Just an interesting read about what's going on out there and what may or may not happen in the future.
Gosh, if we're 25 years away from it, that's that's not tomorrow.
No.
But what's interesting about that, I guess it just proves how wonderful the human mind is and how hard it is to replicate.
Yep.
What humans can do as drivers. It's really complicated.
Oh yeah.
And I guess Karen, you were touching on a little bit with the child on the robot in the retail store, right? I mean, these are really complicated issues when you get into some type of robotics or automation.
The human factor is the hardest factor to account for, I think. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Karen, we have had a fantastic conversation. We want to thank you for coming on the program with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Sure. But that does it for us. It's time for us to unplug and disconnect for the day. Again, thanks to Karen. Thanks to our founding sponsors. We will see you again.
The TEConnect podcast is brought to you by Honeywell. The traditional in-store shopping experience is rapidly being replaced by consumers turning to buy online and pick up in store, curbside pickup, lockers, and at-home delivery.
Guided work for retail allows for multiple forms of input, including voice data capture, barcode scanning, and keyboard data entry, which improves productivity, accuracy, and consistency.
Contact your BlueStar representative to evaluate your unique needs and see why Honeywell's guided work for retail is the right choice for meeting current and long-term needs.